Howdy, y'all. Today we're joined by Dr. Bree Jimenez and Dr. Emily Bauk. Dr. Emily Bauk, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure. My name is Emily. I'm a faculty member and the program director of special education at Michigan State University. I have been doing math research for the past decade or so, and I have a big passion for mathematics, although I definitely tried to avoid it because my mom was actually a math teacher growing up. And so when you spend summers folding fraction strips, you try to avoid mathematics, but it just kept drawing me back in. I find that mathematics education and thinking about interventions and supports to be able to support struggling students and students with disabilities is just fascinating. So I'm excited to engage in this research, and I'm excited to talk with you all today.
Thank you so much. Dr. Bree Jimenez, can you go next?
Sure. My name is Bree. I am an associate professor at the University of Texas at Arlington. I have been engaging in math and science research really over the past decade more for students with disabilities and severe disabilities, primarily because I think I was the teacher who was very nervous to teach math. Not really understanding math and not really knowing exactly what that meant, especially for students with intellectual disabilities or students who might be struggling with mathematics or may not have some of those earlier math skills. And how do you really look at grade aligned mathematics? And so it's been fascinating to really think about problem solving and what the essence of mathematics instruction really is, and how do we teach it well.
Awesome. So the first question, I'm actually going to send it to you, Dr. Jimenez. We have a lot of language we use to describe different types of understanding in math, and I think all of that can sometimes lead to confusion, right, when we're trying to have a coherent dialogue with people. So can you briefly give us a definition for what we mean when we talk about conceptual understanding in math, and then also procedural understanding?
So when I think about conceptual understanding really as kind of that big picture, the principles of what it is that we're trying to understand, and the interrelationship between that math task and the mathematics, the numeracy, all of those components that come together. And I think it's kind of part of it that is a little bit more generalizable. We hope that as students gain conceptual understanding, they're able to kind of carry that from one area of math to the next, and really kind of progress with their understanding and getting deeper and deeper conceptually, and applying that across different areas of math and from one grade level to the next. And so, when I think about procedural, it's kind of, what do kids do to solve the problem? How can they solve the problem? And I think one of the things I think about when I think about the procedure is that it is specific to the problem type. So that procedure is what I do today to solve this type of problem. And there could be more than one procedure, but generally speaking, it's not necessarily generalized from one math skill to the next. It's very specific to whatever we're talking about today.
Dr. Jimenez, I have a follow-up question. So from some of your research, have you seen students, as they're building conceptual understanding, do they take that math knowledge into science context?
Actually, we have seen that. In a group experimental study we did several years ago, we looked at some pretty basic math facts for young children with severe intellectual disabilities. But what we found was that they did carry, so as the procedures or the concepts, both of them, they helped build kind of those skills, those learning skills, those behavioral skills of problem solving, of organizing, of recognizing that the procedures that need to come, that it's important to have a procedure. And we found that within inquiry science to math instruction, that as students may be engaged in math and good quality math instruction with good, concept building and procedures, we found that they also started to engage naturally more in good procedures and conceptual building and inquiry science.
Awesome. Okay, so Dr. Bauk, I have a follow-up question for you. Why is it important that we focus both on conceptual understanding and building that as well as procedural understanding?
Well, I'm going to start off and first say that it's important, I think, to have that strong conceptual understanding, because that's really what mathematics is, right? That's how we engage in mathematics all the time, every day in our lives, right? When am I going to use this? All the time. Mathematics is problem solving, and conceptual understanding of mathematics allows us to engage, right? I know what something is. I love it when kids have a conceptual understanding, when they can tell me what 4 times 3 is, as well as be able to solve it. But knowing mathematics is, in and of itself, we also need to be able to think about how we can solve problems. When kids don't have that procedural knowledge, they get stuck, right? And they get frustrated. We see developing of learned helplessness. We see them not being able to progress in mathematics. We want kids to be able to understand the why behind mathematics and why they are doing something and why this makes sense. But we also need them to be able to engage in those computations, to be able to engage in the procedures. To me, I think that when it's important to be able to help kids develop that conceptual understanding while we're also teaching those procedures. I think that they go hand in hand. I think we want to make sure that we're always explaining why this makes sense and why we're doing this, why we're teaching students. These are effective ways in which we can approach problem solving or solving computational problems.
Yeah, and I kind of want to brag on you a little bit. You have a couple of my favorite articles where you had students actually go out into the community and apply the math skills they're learning out in the community. And I was wondering if you could speak to the impact that might have had on the students of seeing how important mathematics is beyond just an individual math classroom.
I think it's so important. I think that we don't do enough of helping kids connect mathematics to their everyday world around them. Whether you're in a grocery store or you're at a store, at a restaurant, or you're just out and about playing a game, a sports game, there's mathematics that are in there all the time. And I just think we need to be more explicit. One of the things that I always think is so fascinating is that when you go to the pediatrician, they ask if you have books in your home. And there's all these strategies we give to parents about reading, and we don't do enough with mathematics. Mathematics is all around us. And I think it's so important for kids to recognize that they are engaging in mathematics all the time, and they can see themselves as a mathematician, right? I'm doing math. And I think that can help build up confidence and the understanding of how to use that, generalize, right? How to use that in real world settings and to generalize their skills.
Yeah, that's so true. Even like a simple board game you might play, right? If you have number cubes, you're engaged in groupatizing and then one-to-one correspondence and then cardinality, and you can begin to get into addition and subtraction concepts. And it's really simple things that we can help support children and families in. Okay, so this will be where we kind of wrap up, but I would like to know, and Dr. Jimenez, we can start with you. What are some instructional tactics or strategies teachers can use to help build either conceptual or procedural understanding, or perhaps both at the same time?
So one of the coolest things I've seen, and I see in the research by Jenny Rood and Sarah Powell and others, is really that idea of thinking about the schema, the schematic design, and thinking about how we present problems to students to build conceptual understanding, and which in turn, goes into the procedural really. But, thinking about how we present those problems and how we help students understand to read that word problem and to make it come to life. And so in the classroom, or if we're generalizing into the community, we kind of have to start that way of thinking about, okay, we have this story and maybe we have, 2 apples and 3 bananas, and that equals how many fruit, and how are kids setting those problems up and recognizing the schema, the conceptual story of what's going on, and thinking about how we set that up kind of in a graphic organizer, a schematic design or diagram that people might be using. And I think it's a really great example of universal design for learning, because if we think about how we set that up visually, we set that up with the words, we set that up where we can put it into and now start to build the procedures. But we can also add, gestures with, two small groups coming together to a larger group, and chants have been used, and really getting kids to verbally chant the small group equals large group, or there's all these ways that we're putting together that procedure, but we're putting it together in a way that really builds the conceptual understanding simultaneously, or even we're starting with some conceptual understanding and we're building those procedures to go along.
Yeah, it's funny. My son is in first grade, and his math homework last night was problem structures. They were working on the change problem structure, and I was like,
Awesome.
heck yeah, this is
Yay!
awesome. So like anyway, I sat at the kitchen table with him and worked on some of that. It was pretty fun. Dr. Bauk, do you have anything to add, maybe specifically about some of your work with virtual manipulatives in the CRA type sequence?
Yeah, so I was going to kind of highlight two things. One of them being manipulative-based instructional sequences. When I think about manipulative-based instructional sequences, whether like concrete representational abstract or virtual representational abstract, I think this is an instructional sequence that bridges and supports both conceptual understanding and procedural understanding. And a lot of that because, I'm a firm believer in manipulatives and different types of representations, and how, concrete or virtual manipulatives or drawings or number lines can really help students to come to understand the mathematics, but also support those procedural steps as they're learning those. And with the manipulative-based instructional sequence, we're using explicit instruction, right? So we're helping students to see our understanding of mathematics and translate that into how it is that they can approach solving it themselves. So that's one that I think is an instructional approach that actually supports both of conceptual and procedure. And the other one I just want to note is I think number talks have a lot of power, again, to support conceptual understanding and procedural understanding, in the sense that they really are supporting strategies, and students can take those strategies and approach them to solve problems, to understand and to solve problems. And so that's really a very much an emerging area of interest of mine, is the importance and the value of number talks in supporting students' understanding of mathematics and their ability to engage in strategies to solve problems.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know some of the recent work by Margaret Flores and Stephanie Marano was kind of looking at the CRA framework versus tweaking it a little bit and basically integrating some of the abstract earlier on. And they basically have found that that's a little bit more efficient than going straight CRA. And I think it hits on your point that it's really developing both conceptual and procedural understanding concurrently.